So the subject of this morning's sermon is Atonement, or At-One-Ment. And in it I will be exploring a seasonal practice of atonement and forgiveness as a way of re-entering right relationship with ourselves, our ancestors, family and friends, the earth, and with all that is. This is offered as preparation for entering more open-heartedly into the upcoming season of light. And it was very much inspired by the Jewish tradition of Yom Kippur, which has just passed. I just think it's a lovely tradition and one that could be applied in many other places. I find myself very drawn to the concept of atonement as practiced by those of the Jewish faith at the time of Yom Kippur. This Day of Atonement is considered to be the holiest day on their calendar. It is the day when the Jewish people reflect on their sins and ask for forgiveness from God and from those whom they have wronged. Can you not hear me? Oh, there we go. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. Should I start over? No. Okay, good. That's encouraging, right? Okay. In their faith, there is no concept of original sin, yet they understand that all people are capable of sinning throughout their lives simply because they are human. This practice addresses not only the ways in which one has personally transgressed, offending both God and fellow human beings, but also encourages a mature sense of responsibility and accounting for one's own actions. It involves seeking forgiveness from and making amends to the person against whom one has sinned. Most of all, it recognizes our shared humanity and imperfections, thus allowing for redemption. I think this practice could be employed very usefully as a way of checking in on a regular basis and seeing for ourselves how we're doing, acknowledging the ways in which we have fallen short or missed the mark, and offering an opportunity to clear the slate and start over for the coming year. It is a far kinder, gentler, and I think more effective practice than the one I was taught growing up. As indicated in the description of the sermon, the first relationship that invites atonement and seeks ways to return to autonomy is the one we have with ourselves, digging deep to uncover the myriad ways in which we have not been true to ourselves. The instances in which we have sold ourselves down the river in ways large and small, in an effort to fit in, to be one of the crowd, to just get along in a world that values being homogeneous far more than unique. We quickly learn that going along to get along is rewarded, while being true to one's own inner voice and calling often results at best in being othered or treated as less than. We learn quickly that how we appear is more often more important than who and what we really are. Illusion is more highly prized than truth. I learned this particular lesson early on, at Sunday school, in fact. My father was Catholic, my mother was Episcopalian. Neither one of them were particularly religious. But my dad had gone to Catholic school, so the long fingers of fear of stepping out of line still had their grip on him. Thanks to an exceptionally enlightened priest for those times, they were allowed to marry in the church, albeit a side chapel out of sight, with the caveat being that should the marriage produce any children, they would be raised in the Catholic faith. I came along 7 years later. I think I started going with my dad to church around the age of 5. I loved the grandeur of the huge Gothic church, the smell of incense, the robes, the mystery of the foreign language Mass was conducted in. I liked getting dressed up every Sunday. The new outfit at Easter each year, the smell of fresh greens on Palm Sunday. Actually, that was my favorite. It all seemed magical and quite benign. I even had a little white prayer book of my own with gold embossing and gilded page edges with a picture of white Jesus in the front with his blonde curls and his blue eyes. When I turned 6, I started attending Sunday school after church. I learned from Sister Mary Catherine that God was love, and that he was everywhere. I also learned that non-Catholics would burn in hell and could never enter the kingdom of heaven. I remember clearly getting hysterical and shouting through my tears that my mother was a wonderful person and surely she was not going to hell. It was traumatic. Soon it was time to be groomed for First Communion. Initially, that seemed lovely. A springtime celebration, a new white dress with a white satin sash my mother sewed for me, white Mary Janes with lacy ankle socks, and a circlet of fresh white flowers we kept in the fridge, praying every day that it would last until the day. All was great until Sister Mary Catherine told us that we had to make our first confession prior to the event, and that we all needed to go home and come up with a short list of sins to tell the priest. Most of the kids had plenty to choose from, although I still seriously doubt that a 6-year-old can do anything that warrants confession. My dilemma was different, though, and weighed heavily on my child's mind. While all of the other kids were prepared to say that they had talked back to their mother, refused to do chores, or had been mean to their brother or sister, I was stymied. I never talked back to my mother. I loved her. I went every Saturday to my grandmother's house and dusted 10 rooms for a quarter, willingly, because I loved and respected her, and also because she baked bread on Saturdays, and I really loved that. I was an only child. I had no siblings to be mean to, but the pressure was on to come up with something as the days ticked by. Mercifully, at the final hour, it came to me. I composed a short list consisting of, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." I talked back to my mother 3 times. I was cross with my grandmother once. I balked at all my chores twice. And lastly, I told a very big lie. This worked because the first 3 were lies, and the last one covered it. The priest was happy, and for the small price of reciting 2 Our Fathers and 3 Hail Marys, I was home free. That day, I learned my first important lesson into the ways of getting along in the world. Just give them what they want, even if it is not the truth. Tell them what they want to hear, and you will be accepted into the fold. Although not everyone had this particular experience, I bet you can find one in your own childhood with the same message. And as we go on in life, through its many stages, the messages continue in the same vein. As we move through the grades in school, we learn quickly that it does not pay to be different, to stand out in any way, to be too pretty or handsome, too well-dressed, too smart. This last one particularly applied to girls because, as everyone knows, boys have fragile egos and no one likes a girl who is too smart. We mold ourselves in order to be picked for groups, for teams, accepted into clubs. Later on, the pressure takes on a different flavor and involves being picked for the football team or cheerleading, being asked out or to prom. All the major milestones our society deems important that have far more to do with appearance than who you really are or what you're made of. I suspect these days the pressures are even greater, start younger, and are far more serious. For me, when the outside world was cruel, I always had the refuge of my home and parents to return to. For many these days, that is not the case, and it makes me grateful that I am old and was navigating far simpler times back then. As young adults, we learn different ways by which we are expected to go along to get along. The pressure to get into a good college, get a good job, get married, buy a house, start a family. All these modern rites of passage are still expectations, but no longer have the scaffolding of support from extended family, community, our institutions. The village is no more. Young adults, themselves ill-equipped to withstand the pressures of an often unkind world, are forced to go into it alone, while at the same time bringing the next generation along with them. Young women now enjoy the benefit of having any career they choose, but are still pressured to also have a husband and children at some point. They are told that they can have it all, and while that may be true on its face, the reality is that they cannot have it all at the same time. Young families are not supported with good maternal and family health, sufficient support and time off for childbirth, or affordable daycare when they try to return to work, facing the impossible task of juggling career and family. When faced with burnout and overwhelm, they blame themselves because surely it must be their fault when they cannot live up to the expectation of having it all. They must be doing something wrong. Life in our modern world keeps us busy and distracted enough that we do not have the time nor the energy to stop and reflect on any of this, and often find ourselves at the end of our careers wondering where the time went, what it was all for, and what happened to that person we were when we first started life, when we knew who we were, when we had big ideas and feelings and hopes and dreams, when it was natural to tell the truth, before we got lost along the way, before we got swept under the rug. One of the gifts of elderhood is to finally have the time to stop and look back, if we dare. To go deep within, pick up that thread and follow it back to our beginnings. To rekindle a relationship with who we really are at our core. To atone for the many ways we let ourselves down, sold ourselves short, abandoned our own inner child. We must understand that the cards were always stacked against us. It was never our fault. And to make friends again with who we are at our very center. To allow that person we forsook so very long ago to come out into the light of day once again, to be given back their voice and to shine with the brilliance of their authentic self. It is never too late to be who you are. We also can practice atonement with our ancestors, starting with our parents. Most of us probably no longer have our parents with us, with the exception of Mr. Hotchkiss. Most of us probably no longer have our parents with us. Many of us had less than ideal relationships with them, and probably most of us have some unfinished business that could be put to rest to the benefit of both ourselves and them. My mother died 7 years ago at the age of 95. Up until the age of 10 or 12, I thought the sun rose and set with her and believed every word she said. But once I started getting out into the world and met other people and started developing my own personality, rather than being a clone of her, the troubles began and would last the rest of our lives together. There were many wonderful years and some not so good ones. There were even times when we did not speak. But never in all of that time did either of us ever doubt the extraordinary bond of love that existed between us. There was much that went unsaid and unresolved, and now she is gone. But I have discovered in the years that have ensued that a great deal of healing can be done after someone has passed. I have delved into my ancestry with an open mind and curiosity, and I think have come to realize that much of what I thought was smallness and prejudice and mean-spiritedness actually stemmed from a great fear of the world. My mother was a very small woman, and she created all sorts of barriers around herself, not out of a sense of superiority, but because she never felt sufficiently equipped to navigate a world that seemed too big and too dangerous for her. And yet in other ways, she was one of the most courageous women I have ever known. I am now at a place where I can forgive the things I once railed against and applaud the things that were truly remarkable. I recognize and accept that I embody both. I know that this healing is able to flow across the veil and nourish both of us on either side. And it is now with love and pride that I can say, I am my mother's daughter. Sorry. It is the same with older ancestral work. Many of us in recent years have delved into the history of our country and perhaps learned of events that involved our ancestors that we wish we had not uncovered. Learning about where they came from, however, and learning what their lives might have been like before coming to this country can help promote greater understanding and forgiveness as well. Much of the harm of colonization was merely a mirror image of what those who came here had experienced in their own countries of origin. While perhaps their actions were not excusable, they are understandable, and certainly, when passed through the lens of compassion, are deserving of redemption. We can practice atonement with our family and friends. I find that what is most helpful in this regard is to encourage a greater sense of humility in ourselves, to remember that we are certainly not perfect, that all of us have caused our share of hurt and harm, sometimes unknowingly, other times with eyes wide open and with purpose. We must remember that we too are a product of so many factors that we did not choose. In developing greater compassion for ourselves, it becomes easier to have compassion towards all beings. This does not come easily. It is hard work. But it is necessary, and once accomplished, it is freeing. In the end, forgiveness is an inside job, one that is a gift to ourselves. Those of us who no longer have living parents might well have living siblings. We are all looking at the years ahead being fewer in number than those behind us. Now is the time to get to work clearing those slates of long-held resentments, burying the hatchets, and coming into right relationship with remaining family and friends. Remembering how we once loved each other, how once we were intimately entwined in each other's lives before the world broke our spirits, and with them, the bonds that held us close. Now is the time before it is too late. Were it all possible, set having no regrets as your goal. It is helpful to remember that we are all just frail, fragile human beings doing our best. Let us turn now to our relationship with Earth, our precious planet, our one and only home. Practicing atonement with her and coming back into right relationship is not only the right thing to do, but our very survival depends upon it. For millennia, we coexisted here along with all other life forms. We honored the earth as our mother, she who provided for us, who held us in her loving embrace. We kept her cycles, marked time by her seasons and the movement of the sun, the moon, and the stars in the sky. We honored her natural laws and lived within their boundaries. We practiced gratitude, awe, reverence, and venerated her with song, dance, art, and the way we lived our daily lives. We made art, not war. We asked permission and took only what we needed to promote the thriving and continuation of all of life. But about 4,000 years ago, that all changed. Veneration of Mother Earth was replaced by the sky gods, and Earth became unholy ground, something lesser, to be subdued, subjugated, and degraded. The focus was now shifted to the sky, the heavens, the afterlife, not this one. Over time, the relationship between humanity and Earth and all of creation was severed to the point of being forgotten in current times. We no longer see ourselves as part of the rest of creation. We live our lives inside boxes made of wood and steel and concrete. We have paved over the ground so we do not even make contact with the earth when we walk upon her body. We have poisoned the air and the soil and the waters. We have completely altered the weather, the seasons. We are living in a time of collapse, of fires and floods and erratic weather patterns. There is no place we can live that feels safe anymore. And it is questionable what kind of future those who come after us will have, if any. We live in a time of great peril that we have collectively brought upon ourselves, and we are afraid. It is not useful to lament or feel guilty or shut down or bury our heads in the sand. It is not useful to let fear immobilize us. It is not useful to throw up our hands in despair. What would be useful is to make amends to the earth in whatever ways we still have available to us. It would be helpful to educate ourselves on what is happening, even though it is difficult to bear. Not to feel sad or guilty, but to empower ourselves with knowledge so we do not continue to cause additional harm. There are forces in the world consumed by greed who will fight until the last drop of oil is extracted from the ground, the last tree is cut down. These are not forces that we can fight against as individuals. They are way too powerful. But together, we can bring about the shift in consciousness necessary to begin to return to right relationship with the rest of life. What we each can do is make our best choices in our own lives, to not waste, to live more lightly and less violently on the earth. We can offer love to the earth, spend time with her in solitude, meditation, or prayer. Tell her we love her, make offerings, perform music, dance in her honor, hold ceremony. Remember her and remember ourselves as part of the one great web of life. We have much to atone for with earth, but we have much to offer as well, and perhaps it is not too late to make amends. We are not here by accident, nor are we a mistake. We simply have lost our way. We are as necessary to the divine plan for the earth as she is to ours. We are meant to evolve together. I hope that soon we will be able to reclaim our birthright and act responsibly to save what still can be saved, and to restore balance to this beautiful sentient being we call Earth. And finally, we must return to right relationship with the God of our understanding. I personally do not use the word God, but do so here for lack of something better. I think all it is, or the mystery, comes closest for me. But I also think whatever I am trying to name is too vast to be captured in any one word or phrase. I only know for sure the exquisite beauty, order, and perfection evident everywhere in the universe cannot possibly be an accident. And so I feel the need to name some force as its amazing author. Each of us comes into this life carrying a unique gift that is ours and ours alone to deliver for the good of humanity and all of life. Shortly after birth, the knowledge of what that is begins to fade, and it is the journey of our lives to remember and then to find the best delivery system available to share that gift with the world. We are all born into a time when our particular gift is essential. We who are alive now have been born into a time when many gifts will be needed to usher humanity through changes of cataclysmic proportions. We may not feel like it, but we are more than up to the task. First, it is essential to remember who we truly are and where we come from. We are all sparks of the divine, which makes us all one. Whoever that unnamed author of the universe is working through us. We are the eyes and ears and hands and voices of divinity. We must first atone for our profound forgetting. We must forgive ourselves for that and for allowing ourselves to cover over our light to the point that it is nearly invisible. We must learn to let it shine once again, first tentatively perhaps, but eventually at full power. It is by this light that we will find one another, recognize each other, and it is then that we will remember that we are not alone. We are not adrift, and we are not powerless by any means. In fact, the very opposite is true. We can then come together, combine our gifts in ways that will benefit the world. We can overcome the powers that do not serve life and help usher in a new age of thriving and harmony for all beings. We are now moving toward the season when many traditions celebrate the light. In November, there is Diwali, the Hindu festival of lights, symbolizing the spiritual victory of light over darkness, good over evil, and knowledge over ignorance. In December, we begin with Hanukkah and the lighting of the menorah in commemoration of the miracle of the oil burning for 8 days in honor of the victory of the Maccabees over the Greeks. On December 21st, we honor the winter solstice, the longest night, followed by the rebirth of the sun, S-U-N, which will steadily increase in power and height from that point on. And finally, on December 25th, followers the world over celebrate the birth of the sun, S-O-N, who is known, among other things, as the light of the world. All these traditions, same theme, with slightly different details. Coincidence? I think not. So as we prepare to enter this holy season of light, let us consider a practice of atonement, to clear our inner landscapes in preparation for the coming of the light, that we will be ready and open to receive and hold greater light ourselves, and then find ways to radiate that light out to a darkening world that hungers for our gift. May it be so.